"Let me just say this before the champagne hits Laurel and I are done." He said it lightly, casually, like a man announcing the results of a golf round, not detonating a marriage in front of 50 people. Russell raised his glass with that familiar lazy elegance, the kind he reserved for boardrooms and country clubs. His voice, calm, practiced, and proud, cut through the summer air beneath the white-draped tent. It carried across clinking glassware and murmured laughter sounding almost noble. But it was not noble. It was a bullet wrapped in velvet. The laughter died instantly. Forks paused midair. A guest at the end of the table coughed once and then froze. Even the cicadas seemed to lose their rhythm. It was not a toast. It was an execution. And I was the one being laid to rest. Russell smiled after saying it, of course. He always smiled when he thought he had pulled off something clever. But the silence that followed did not applaud. It suffocated. Before I take you further, let me ask, have you ever been ambushed in public by someone you trusted in private? Betrayed in front of the very people who were supposed to celebrate with you? If you have, then stay with me. Subscribe to Revenge with Seren. Because this story is not just mine, it might be yours too. I did not scream, I did not cry, I did not throw a glass or slam my fists like a woman in a midday drama. I simply placed my hands in my lap, folded them gently, and said evenly, "Well, that is bold." His mouth twitched barely but enough. That was not the reaction he had rehearsed. He wanted a spectacle, a scene, something messy and dramatic he could refer back to later and say, "See, she is unhinged." I had no choice, but I gave him nothing. No fire, no fuel, no excuse to make me smaller. My name is Laurel Jennings. I am 52 years old. I have worked as a public librarian in this town for nearly 30 years. I have edited newsletters, built reading programs for children who now bring their own children to Story Hour. I have hosted silent auctions, raised funds for broken HVAC systems, and archived hundreds of grant applications no one else wanted to touch. And I edited his resumes through 3 career changes. I prepared roast dinners on Sundays, baked cupcakes for the Parent-Teacher Association, and balanced the books he never once opened. I managed Riley's field trip forms, dentist appointments, and music lessons while he found himself again and again. I showed up when it was inconvenient. I stayed when it was thankless. But in that moment, beneath that white tent strung with rented lights and helium balloons, I felt something shift. Not a crack, not a shatter, just a click. A small internal click. Like the sound of a door locking, like something final closing gently and forever. I looked around the tent. There were faces I had fed, people I had opened my home to. Friends of Russell's who came to our Thanksgiving dinners. Neighbors who had once borrowed flour and cried on my front porch. Some stared down at their plates. Others glanced at him, then at me, uncertain which direction they should look. No one moved. And then I saw her, Riley, my daughter. My reason for staying as long as I did. She was sitting near the center of the table, her graduation cap still perched, slightly crooked tassel swaying near her cheek. She held her cloth napkin in a clenched hand, knuckles pale. Her expression was a strange mixture of confusion and something worse, shame. That was when the flicker of doubt entered my chest. I wondered, would she think I had abandoned her by leaving? Now would this become another memory she would have to explain to someone later? But then I saw her hand tremble again, and I stood, not fast, not defiantly, slowly, deliberately, like I had practiced it 100 times in the mirror, even if I never had. I walked over to her. I placed one hand gently on her shoulder and said loud enough for every ear in that tent to hear, "I am so proud of you. This is your day. No one, not even your father, can take that away." She looked up at me, eyes glassy, and I kissed her cheek. Her hand in mine was trembling, but she did not let go. Then I turned not toward Russell, not toward the guests. I turned toward the dessert table where my lemon meringue pie still sat untouched. Beside it were folded name cards, silk centerpieces, and paper fans I had hand-assembled the night before. I took one breath. Then I faced the crowd. "Please enjoy the evening. The food is excellent. The night is still young." And I walked out. No apology, no tears, just motion. The kind that tells a room full of watchers, "This is no longer your scene to narrate." My heels struck the stone path outside the tent like punctuation marks, measured, final. I did not stumble. I did not flinch. Behind me, silence deepened. Then came the whispering, the kind that only starts when someone witnesses something too real to forget. The air outside was thick and hot. Summer clung to my skin like consequence. But I welcomed it. I needed the weight. It reminded me that I was still here. Then behind me, I heard his voice. Laurel, not smooth, not proud. It cracked. He sounded uncertain for the first time in years. I did not turn around. I did not slow down. Because what he did not know, what none of them knew, was that I had already seen this moment coming. Not exactly this toast, not exactly this timing. But I had felt the storm gathering, the late nights, the gym bags packed but never used, the new cologne, the phone screen flipped downward on the counter like a secret pressed flat. And then there was Kendra, 37, communications consultant. Supposedly. She wore lavender that evening, fitted but modest, deliberate in its softness. She sat 3 tables back, sipping her wine too slowly, too tightly. She never once looked at me, and that told me everything. I kept walking. The gravel path was uneven, but I did not trip. My car was parked beneath the same oak tree where Riley once collected leaves for her 3rd-grade science journal. I reached for the door handle but paused. In the reflection on the window, I saw my face. Calm, unflinching. That was new. Inside my purse was a sealed cream envelope. It had weight to it, not emotional weight. Legal weight, weight that mattered. Documents only I and my attorney had seen. I had not known whether I would need them that night, but something in me had packed them anyway. Russell thought that was his moment of triumph, his big twist, his bold finale. He did not realize he was walking a path I had mapped months ago. I slid into the driver's seat, closed the door. The sound felt clean, final. As the tent lights dimmed behind the trees, I let silence fill the space around me. Then I smiled. Not from revenge, from relief. Because sometimes the cleanest break is not the one they make. It is the one you make quietly before anyone else even notices the cracks. He toasted our ending like it was a joke, but I had already written my beginning. So tell me, have you ever been left behind in public, only to realize you had already left them long before they opened their mouth? If so, leave a comment. You are not alone. By the time I turned onto the main road, the weight in my chest was not grief. It was something cleaner, sharper, like the first full breath after a storm has passed. I was not fleeing the scene. I was driving into the next chapter, the one I had already outlined in silence. The envelope was still in my purse, cream-colored, embossed. It rested beside my lip balm and a soft green pen I always kept for overdue book returns. It was not dramatic. It was not revenge. It was closure with weight. I had never known exactly when I would need it, only that I would. The car moved beneath me like a soft hum, its engine a steady heartbeat. I did not turn on the radio. I did not need distraction. I needed clarity. At the next red light, I opened the center console, unlocked my phone, and tapped into a folder labeled Garden Tools. Inside, screenshots, email chains, transaction logs. 3 separate Airbnb bookings under Russell's name. Each one listed 2 guests. Each one carried the same instruction, no contact at check-in. That folder used to be suspicion. Now it was evidence. I had the receipts, the timestamps, the charges that did not match his calendar, the fragments of loyalty shredded into bank codes and Gmail drafts. Betrayal does not always explode. Sometimes it drips in slowly. A hotel invoice on a weekend he said he was traveling for work. A fragrance that lingered on his shirt, a scent that did not belong to me. A text notification that faded before I could read the name. At first I had told myself I was imagining it, that I was being overly sensitive, that a lavender scarf tucked in the backseat of his car could have belonged to a colleague, that the new cologne was a gift from a client. But even imagination needs a boundary, so I stopped guessing. I started tracking, not his words, his numbers, because money does not lie, it does not fidget, it does not get defensive, it just records. At 8 minutes past 5 in the afternoon, I pulled into Joy's driveway. Her porch light was already glowing, though the sun had not yet dipped below the tree line. It was always on, like her house refused to stop offering comfort. I used the key she insisted I keep. It hung on a crocheted sunflower keychain she had made 16 years ago, back when Riley was still in pigtails. And every Tuesday smelled like lasagna and cinnamon. Inside, the kitchen was still. Afternoon sunlight moved through the lace curtains like water. I placed the kettle on the stove. Green tea, 1 spoonful of honey, no lemon, no shaking hands, only heat against my palms, and focus. Russell never thought I could be dangerous. He thought I cataloged book club flyers and hosted children's craft days. He forgot that I also archived municipal records, interpreted grant data, and located a missing pension payout with nothing but a 6-digit code and a hunch. He said I micromanaged. I called it being prepared. 3 months ago, the cracks widened. A $600 charge from a boutique that did not sell men's clothing. A $1,200 withdrawal from an ATM in a coastal town where he claimed to be scouting clients. He brushed it off, told me I was obsessive, that I needed control. That was when I started the spreadsheet, transaction by transaction, entry by entry. I followed the trail like a librarian follows a citation, quietly, patiently. Until the story told itself. I found the dinner reservation under her name, Kendra, the same woman in lavender, the same one who did not look at me the night Russell made his little speech. She had not needed to. Her silence was louder than any confession. Still, she was not the root. She was only the mirror. Russell had chosen to look into her until he forgot what he had left behind. And that envelope in my purse. It was not a bomb. It was a contract. A preloaded map. Inside was a copy of our post-nuptial agreement. We had signed it 9 years ago after Russell's second failed startup. I had used a portion of my inheritance to cover the mortgage and insisted on the document. He said it was just paperwork. I said it was precaution. He signed it without reading the fine print. But I did. There was a clause tucked quietly in the center of page 3, a fidelity provision that remained active until full legal dissolution of the marriage, not separation, not intention. Legal end. My attorney had highlighted that clause in yellow. I had taken a photo. I had tucked it into my private files like a spare key for a door I hoped I would never need to open. At 18 minutes past 5 in the afternoon, the doorbell rang. Joy was still at work. I walked softly to the window and peered out. Riley stood on the porch. She still wore her dress shoes. Her hands clutched a plastic bouquet from the grocery store. The petals were bruised at the edges. She looked stunned, like the night had broken in a place she had never expected. I opened the door before she could knock. "Mom," she said, her voice raw. "What the hell just happened?" I pulled her into my arms, one hand behind her head, the way I used to do when thunderstorms rattled the windows. She did not resist. She pressed her face against my shoulder and stayed there stiff at first, then melting. "I am sorry," I whispered. "I never meant for tonight to be about him. That woman," she said. "The one in lavender. She never looked at you. She did not need to. So she is the reason she is part of it, but not the whole." We walked into the kitchen. She dropped the flowers on the counter and leaned against the refrigerator like it was the only thing holding her up. "How long have you known?" she asked. "Long enough to stop feeling small," I said. "And to start getting smart." She blinked and a tear clung to her lower lashes, but she smiled. "I always knew you were the one holding everything together." We sat in silence for a while. I poured her tea. No words, no rush, just warmth and breath and steadiness. She needed to see what strength looked like without shouting. Later, I told her enough. Not everything, but enough. Enough for her to understand that what happened tonight was not an emotional reaction. It was the final chapter of a story I had been quietly writing on my own. At 12 minutes past 6 in the evening, she reached across the table for the cream envelope. She did not open it. She held it. "Is this for him?" "Yes," I said. "He will not see it coming, will he?" "No," I said, "but he should have." She placed the envelope gently back on the table and stood up. Then she kissed my cheek. "You are not just strong," she whispered. "You are surgical." I did not respond, because I did not need to. She saw it now, and soon so would he. Sunlight slipped across the ceiling like it was searching for the seams. I was already awake, dressed, no black, no mourning, just slate gray slacks and a white blouse with crisp sleeves I had ironed the night before. I did not want to look like a widow. I was not grieving a death. I was finalizing a departure. At 8 o'clock in the morning, I stood in my kitchen holding my phone like a scalpel. The draft email was open. It had been sitting there for weeks waiting. The attachments were ready, every one of them a tile in the mosaic I had spent months constructing. There was no poetry in it, no flourish, just evidence. The post-nuptial agreement scanned and sealed. The clause on fidelity highlighted in yellow, a ledger of non-negotiable assets. A letter from my attorney worded like a courtroom oath. I had considered writing a message of my own, something clean, something final. But Russell did not deserve my words. He would receive facts, only facts. At 8:47 in the morning, I tapped send. Then I set the phone on the counter like a chess piece. I poured myself a cup of Earl Grey tea, still too hot to sip. I waited. At 8:59 in the morning, the phone vibrated once, delivered. At 9 minutes past 9 in the morning, it rang. Of course it did. Russell had always hated waiting for control. Laurel, his voice cracked at the edge, shocked, trying not to sound cornered. "What is this documentation?" I said. "Is this a threat? Some kind of play? Do I sound like I am bluffing?" Silence. Then the familiar scramble. The sound of a man who always believed things would fall back into place. "This clause, you are stretching it. That is old. Possibly unenforceable." Section 6. Subsection B. I said, my voice calm. "Fidelity is expected until the legal dissolution of marriage. You signed it, Russell." Another pause, then a sharp exhale. "You planned this." "No," I said. "I prepared." "You always were a rules person, and you never were." More silence, but now it was pulsing. Finally, he said, "You could have talked to me. You could have respected me." He had no response to that. Nothing that mattered. At 11 minutes past 9 in the morning, the line went dead. I made a note of the time, not out of spite, out of principle. Every move was now logged, documented, precise. At 12 minutes past 10 in the morning, a text arrived from Philip. Notice received. "Discovery phase begins Tuesday. You are ahead of schedule." I typed one word in response. Understood. At 11 o'clock in the morning, the phone rang again. It was Denise from book club. Her voice wavered, the kind of tone people use when they are not sure if they are allowed to talk about what they saw. "I was not sure if I should call," she said. "I just wanted to let you know I saw Cassandra this morning. She was leaving his house." She looked like she had not slept. Maybe I said she finally started reading the fine print. Denise let out a small nervous laugh. "Laurel, I just want you to know I am on your side." "There are no sides," I said. "Just truth and consequences." At 42 minutes past 12 in the afternoon, Riley texted me. He called me. I did not answer. I replied immediately. "That is not your weight to carry." She sent a single red heart emoji. It landed heavier than she meant. At 2 o'clock in the afternoon, I drove to Joy's house. Her patio smelled of rosemary and lemon balm, the kind of place where hard truths could sit out in the open without wilting. She handed me a cold glass of lemonade. No words, no questions, just support. "You remember the night he proposed," she said eventually, "at the lake house, after his first bonus." I nodded. "He wore that awful striped tie. You said he made you feel like you were finally building something." I thought I was. And now I took a sip. Tart, clean. Now I know I was the bricks. He was just the paint. She raised her glass. To structural integrity. At exactly 3 o'clock in the afternoon, a new email came through. Russell's new attorney, different firm, less polished, more aggressive. There was no apology, no courtesy, just a line about reframing asset negotiations for mutual clarity. I replied with a single sentence. "Please direct all further communication through counsel." At 15 minutes past 4 in the afternoon, the doorbell rang. A delivery, pink peonies, fully bloomed. A card addressed to Riley. I did not open it. I did not have to. I left it on the kitchen table. When Riley returned home, she glanced at it. She picked up the card, read it, and said nothing. Then she walked to the trash bin, tore it clean in half, and dropped it in. "He still thinks flowers undo damage," she said. "They do not," I replied. "But they tell you exactly who he thinks he is dealing with." She nodded. That was enough. That evening we cooked together, stir-fry with ginger and scallions. The scent filled the kitchen like memory. It felt ordinary, but in the right way. It felt like recovery. "You know," Riley said as she plated the food, "I used to think you were too calm. And now I think calm is lethal. In a good way, in the best way." After dinner, she packed a weekend bag. Friends were waiting at the lake. "Are you all right if I go?" she asked. "You earned the break," I said. At the door, she paused, then hugged me longer than usual. "Thanks for not making it worse," she said. "You mean like your father did?" Exactly. When she left, the house was not quiet. It was balanced. I poured another cup of tea and returned to my desk. I opened the folder marked Phase 2. Inside spreadsheets, legal protections, and the short list of strategic assets Russell had no idea I had already secured. 3 accounts transferred. The silent shares in our family investment bought out. The Savannah property refiled under a new limited liability company in my maiden name. All methodical, all legal, all quiet. I was not punishing him. I was protecting what he thought I would never notice. In the corner of the folder was something new. A consulting offer from Haven & Moore, a women-led financial advisory firm based in Charleston. I had sent an inquiry 1 month ago. They had responded with interest. A part-time consulting role, possibly partnership. I had told no one, except Riley. When I mentioned it, her eyes lit up. "I did not know you still had dreams," she said. "I never stopped," I told her. "I just paused them." Russell thought I was scrambling to catch up, but he never saw the full board. I was not reacting. I was executing. And I was not finished yet. By Monday morning, the summer heat in Augusta had already settled across the windows like a second skin. It was just after 7 o'clock, and the air inside the house was still, but not peaceful. Something about the silence had changed. It was no longer the quiet of routine. It was the silence that follows a shift. The kind you feel in your bones before your mind even catches up. I moved through my kitchen as I always did. I brewed my coffee. I toasted a piece of sourdough. I turned on the morning news. But I knew the truth. This was no longer the home of a wife. This was the command post of a woman who had stopped asking and started acting. At exactly 9:10 in the morning, my phone lit up with Philip's name. My attorney's voice was calm and composed, just like I needed it to be. "It is done," he said. "The bank has served notice. Your joint accounts are frozen. Your personal trust is now isolated. No outside access. And the Savannah property, it triggered a fraud alert. He cannot sell or remortgage anything not until the investigation is complete." I closed my eyes for just a moment. "And the new filings, all 5 limited liability companies are now officially registered. Each one is protected under your name, Laurel Caldwell." "Thank you," I said. "Do not answer his calls." Philip added, "He will try, but now is not the time for conversation." "Understood," I replied. I ended the call. I did not need to pace the room. I did not need to scream or cry or shake. The panic was gone. In its place, clarity. At 11 o'clock, sharp Joy called. She did not waste time. "He is outside Cassandra's condo," she said. "And she is not letting him in." I walked to the window and looked out over the garden while I listened. "He looks ridiculous," she added. Shirt wrinkled, hair a mess, like someone who thought he was walking into a love story, and hit a locked door instead. "She is finished," I said. "She just does not know what to do with the silence yet." He kept knocking, Joy told me, and she just stood inside the doorway and closed the curtains. I did not reply. Some images are better left in the mind, perfectly preserved. At exactly 12:30 in the afternoon, I stepped out of the house, not to hide, not to escape. I went into town to take up space in the world again, to remind myself I belonged in it. I walked to Spines and Leaves, the old bookstore on Franklin Street with the warped wooden floors and poetry stacked by the register. Marla looked up from behind the counter as I entered. "Laurel Jennings," she said. "Well, I have not seen you since February." I needed the right reason, I told her, and now I have one. She poured me a paper cup of hibiscus tea, still free for regulars, and said nothing else. I left with 2 books, one on financial independence for women in midlife, and one slim memoir titled When She Finally Said No. At 2 o'clock, I arrived at the notary's office on Maple Avenue. The assistant greeted me with a tight smile. "Are you here for the real estate transfer documents?" "Yes," I said. "They should all be filed under my maiden name, Laurel Caldwell." She flipped through a stack and handed me a pen. "Initial here, and your full signature at the bottom." I signed every line, slowly making sure my strokes were clean. Each page was another lock on a door he could no longer enter. At 3:15, the final document was sealed. 3 properties were now protected. 2 investment accounts officially transferred. He had no idea that while he was planning a clean exit, I had already restructured the foundation beneath him. Not to hurt him, but to make sure I would never be at his mercy again. At 4:30 in the afternoon, my phone buzzed with a photo from Riley. She stood on the beach, bare feet in the water, the sky behind her a wash of gold and blue. She was smiling. The caption read, "Freedom tastes like salt and sunscreen." I replied with a red heart. Nothing more was needed. At 6 o'clock sharp, I returned home. The garden along the front walk looked dry. I changed into gardening clothes, grabbed the hose, and stepped outside. The water soaked into the earth slow and steady, and I let it run while I watched the soil darken and swell. Then I reached for the tray of chrysanthemums I had picked up from the nursery. 2 weeks earlier, deep burgundy and orange, the colors of endings. I planted them in a clean, even row. They would not bloom until late September when the nights cooled and the leaves began to fall. But I would be here to see them. And Russell would not. At 7:15 in the evening, I walked back inside. The answering machine blinked. 7 messages, 4 from Russell, 3 from his attorney, 1 from his cousin who had not called me in years. I deleted them all without listening. There was nothing left for me in their voices. I brewed a cup of chamomile tea, lit the candle Riley had given me last Christmas, cinnamon and cedar, and returned to my desk. I opened the folder labeled Second Phase. Inside were client lists, a speaking engagement invitation, and 3 new consultation requests, forwarded by Joy. One name caught my attention: Dana Brooks, 45, recently separated, mother of 2. She had written just 1 sentence in her inquiry form. I heard you are the woman who does not flinch. I sent her a reply. Let us meet. I am available Thursday morning at 10 o'clock or Friday afternoon at 3 o'clock. At 9:15, I stepped out onto the porch. The air was thick with night sounds: crickets, a neighbor's television faint in the distance, the whisper of wind moving through the boxwoods. I sat with my tea and watched the candlelight flicker. I was not waiting for anything, not anymore. I was simply here, still, decided. And if Russell thought he had ended the story, he had misunderstood entirely. The ending was never his to write, not anymore, because I was not done. Not with planting, not with building, not with living the life I should have claimed 10 years ago. Russell once told me that consequences were negotiable, that as long as you acted confident, people would give you the benefit of the doubt. But that morning, as I stood at the kitchen counter rereading the financial summary Philip had sent me overnight, I realized he still believed that. Even now, with his name sitting on a legal motion for concealed assets, he thought this would blow over. He had always played the odds. I had always read the fine print. At exactly 8 o'clock in the morning, I stepped into Philip's office wearing the same calm as armor. My blouse was crisp. My heels didn't shake. He slid the file toward me with 2 fingers. He has not responded through official counsel, he said, voice steady. But his original legal firm was replaced last night. The system flagged a switch at 7:34. I opened the folder. Every number, every document, every signature had been laid out like a blueprint. This was not chaos, it was architecture. Should we expect pushback? I asked. He may attempt a negotiation through personal channels, but your current position is stronger. We will proceed with the motion regarding improper financial conduct. Good, I said. Let him scramble. By 9:30 in the morning, I was back home. A neighbor walking her Labrador waved from the sidewalk. I saw your husband's car parked over on 5th Street last night, she said casually. As if mentioning the weather, I nodded. Looks like he is trying out new neighborhoods. Inside, the answering machine blinked. 4 missed calls, 1 voicemail. I played it through the kitchen speaker. Russell's voice came through, frustrated, controlled, performative. Laurel, we need to talk. You cannot just send lawyers and freeze accounts like this. I deserve a conversation. Call me back. He still thought this was about dialogue. He still thought we were negotiating. I was not. I was executing. At 12 o'clock noon, Diana arrived with a paper bag from our favorite cafe. Turkey on rye, she said, handing it to me, and lemon cake, because you look like a woman who has been in battle all morning. We sat at the kitchen table, sunlight pouring across the floor. He is unraveling, I said, stirring my tea. Still trying to spin it like he is the one blindsided. Because men like Russell believe that if you do not yell, you must not care, Diana replied. He cannot understand strategy that does not need a spotlight. She reached across and touched my wrist. You are doing beautifully. After lunch, I opened the email from my financial advisor. The forensic report was finished. It confirmed that Russell had attempted to divert a quarterly bonus into an unlisted account opened in a friend's name, masked by a shell business. The digital trail was airtight. Transactions, timestamps, transfers. I printed it. 2 copies, 1 for Philip, 1 for my own records. I had kept a clean binder for months now, not out of paranoia, out of principle. At 3 o'clock, my phone rang again. Amelia. Her voice came softly through the line. He called me, she said. He told me you were trying to destroy him. I let the silence hold a moment. I am not trying to destroy him, I said. I am trying to stop him from taking what does not belong to him. I know, she whispered. I told him not to call me again, but I just needed to hear your voice. I am right here, I said. You are not alone in this. At 4:15 in the afternoon, the doorbell rang. For a heartbeat, I considered not answering, but when I opened it, I found Cassandra. No makeup, no charm, just reality standing awkwardly on my porch in a pale sweater and jeans. May I come in, she asked. I do not want to fight, I need to say this to someone who will actually hear me. I stepped aside without speaking. She sat on the edge of the same armchair she had once mocked during a party 2 summers ago. Now she clutched her hands like they were something breakable. I did not know about the money she began, the hidden accounts, the bonuses. I swear. I thought I was just falling in love with a man who lied to his family, I said. That is what you fell into. She swallowed hard. He said you were cold, that the marriage was just appearances, that you had not touched each other in years. And you believed him. I wanted to, she said. Until I saw the file folder on his desk. Names I did not recognize. Money I never asked about. I crossed my arms. So what now? I left, she said. This morning, I packed everything. I told him he is on his own. And you want what, my blessing? No, she said quietly. I want your honesty. You are the only one who ever saw him clearly. I nodded once. She left without looking back. At 6 o'clock in the evening, Philip called again. We have confirmation of formal service. He has been notified. His attorney proposed early mediation. We declined. You are positioned to move forward without compromise. Thank you, I said. Let us keep the momentum. After the call, I went to the garden. The chrysanthemums had not yet bloomed, but the soil was dark and full. I knelt beside them and cleared a few weeds that had crept in during the heat wave. It felt good to touch something honest, something that would rise from the ground and ask for nothing but water and time. At 7:15 in the evening, I lit a candle and returned to the porch. The lights inside the house glowed warm, no more sterile overheads, just amber lamplight and quiet order. My books were shelved alphabetically. My tea was hot. The world felt balanced. There were no messages I was waiting for, no footsteps I feared. I sat with my cup hands, steady spine upright. The dust had not just settled. I had swept it away myself. Some doors knock louder when you have already locked them. The sound is not louder, it is just unwelcome. That morning, I was pouring tea into 2 porcelain cups when I heard tires on gravel and recognized the familiar hum of Diana's car. She was early. I opened the front door before she could ring the bell. She held up a copy of the Augusta Chronicle. The headline was not large, but the implication screamed between the lines, Trivanta Finance Director named in marital misconduct filing. A single column, Russell's name, no graphic details, just enough for everyone in town to draw their own conclusions. Was it you, Diana asked gently, eyes scanning my face. No, I replied. Philip believes the leak came from a clerk's desk. The documents became public record yesterday. Someone connected the dots. She nodded. Well, it is spreading. We sat on the back porch watching morning mist lift slowly from the lawn like a veil. Cardinals landed near the feeder and fluttered away again. For a while we said nothing. The quiet was not empty. It was honest. At 10 o'clock in the morning my phone rang. A number I did not recognize. I answered anyway. Laurel, the voice cracked slightly. This is Seren, from Trivanta. There is some concern. Someone saw the article. Human Resources is convening this afternoon. They are reviewing Russell's accounts, internal review, but you should know. The investigation has nothing to do with Trivanta, I said. But yes, the documents are real. I figured, she said. I just wanted to give you a heads up. It is moving quickly. She hung up without saying goodbye. I understood. It was not personal. It was proximity. Some people feel guilty just for being close to someone else's truth. At 12 noon, the doorbell rang again. This time it was him. Russell stood on the porch with a face I barely recognized, creased gray and smaller. He held nothing in his hands. No gifts, no gestures, just regret folded badly into his posture. I am not here to fight, he said. I just want 5 minutes. I did not answer. I stepped aside. He entered like a man walking through a museum of his own life. Every photograph seemed to sting him. Every piece of furniture remembered more than he did. He looked toward the kitchen table where Riley once did homework. He glanced up the stairs where Amelia used to sit in her prom dress, waiting for compliments. You made your point, he said, voice brittle. But this public scandal, the article, I did not leak it, I said. It leaked itself, through the truth. 2 clients canceled meetings this morning, he muttered. Said their boards were reviewing partnerships. I cannot fix this if everyone pulls away. That is not my responsibility. I lost Cassandra, he added. She left, I know. He stared at me, eyes red. I never wanted this. I thought we could part quietly, cleanly. You thought you could humiliate me in front of 50 people and still write the script, I said. You never wanted clean. You wanted control. He looked away. I was wrong. You were arrogant. I came to ask if we can do mediation, he said. To avoid a full trial. Not for me, for Amelia. Do not use her to soften the blow, I said. You are asking for privacy now. After you made a spectacle of our ending, I am going to lose everything. You chose everything but us. Silence filled the room like a curtain. Not heavy, just inevitable. He lowered himself into the armchair, the same one Cassandra had sat in days ago. Amelia said she does not want to see me until after the hearing. She needs space. She is all I have left. That is not true, I said. You still have your name, if you stop rewriting the story and start accepting it. He dropped his head into his hands. I stood. You need to leave. He looked up, broken. Will you tell her I came? I will. He walked out without another word. This time I did not watch him go. That evening I called Amelia. He came by, I said. Did he say anything worth remembering? He said he hopes you will speak to him again someday. She was quiet. Maybe, but not now. That is fair. Are you all right, Mom? I am, I said. More than all right. I looked around the room. The energy had shifted. The silence no longer felt haunted. I returned to my desk where a folder sat waiting thick with typed pages and printed drafts. My new business proposal, a mentorship network for women entering financial transitions, divorce, widowhood, retirement. Not just legal guidance, but emotional strength. A space for strategy and healing. I had already built the framework, advisory board, website mock-ups, 3 early clients, and now a scheduled pitch with the Women's Entrepreneur Council next week. I called Diana and asked her to proofread the final draft. You are really doing this, she said, smiling through the phone. Russell would not recognize you now. That is all right, I said. I do. At 9 o'clock in the evening, I stepped outside and stood beneath the porch light. The garden was dark and breathing. The chrysanthemums were not yet blooming, but their roots were deep, their path set. I watched a single moth circle the light once, twice, then vanish into the night. I did not raise my voice to reclaim my life. I rewrote it, patiently, legally, fully. The chapter closed, the house stood, and I finally was moving forward. What struck me most was not the moment he left, but the silence she stood in afterward and how she filled it. It is one thing to be betrayed. It is another to rise quietly, rearranging your life with poise while the world watches. Laurel never raised her voice, but every step she took echoed with the power of dignity reclaimed. If this story reminded you that healing does not always need applause, only direction and self-trust, then subscribe to Revenge with Seren and stay with us. We tell stories where silence speaks and kindness returns stronger than heartbreak.